kind of random.
What up, y'all? Welcome to another Hip Hop Now podcast bonus episode. I am your host, Vegas of Hip Hop Now podcast. Big shout out to the producers of this podcast that are making these bonus episodes and some really good content coming your way via the YouTube channel very, very soon. Very, very soon. 2021. I'm not playing. I'm not one of them cats. We ready. We ready. We've been preparing, but we ready now. Please remember that this podcast, this bonus episode, is a patreon.com/hiphopnow timed exclusive. How long that time will be, who knows? But we know for sure the people who support this podcast will be the first to hear it, respond to it, whatever it may be, because they make this happen. So if you want to become one of those people, just visit patreon.com/hiphopnow. The link is in the description of this episode. There are different levels, some as low as $2 a month and up. Let's get right into the subject though. So you've seen the artwork, you've read the title, and maybe you know or maybe you don't know, but there is a hip hop museum being created for us hip hop fans in the birthplace of hip hop, the Bronx, New York. The name of the museum is the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Not to be confused with the Universal Circus. So it's not the Universal Hip Hop Museum. It's the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Now, I don't know exactly what the science is behind the Universal. I mean, are they trying to say like all hip hop can be in here? Because I don't think it's necessary to say that. Or is the Hip Hop Museum already trademarked and taken, and whoever has it doesn't want to buy it, or maybe they have a high price, so they just say, you know what, the Universal Hip Hop Museum and onward. And here's the description of the Universal Hip Hop Museum on their Twitter account. You can follow them at UHH Museum. The Universal Hip Hop Museum is dedicated to the preservation and celebration of hip hop culture's rich history and lifestyle. Doors will open 2024. Again, their Twitter is UHH Museum. There you can also get to their link tree, which also leads you to their YouTube page, because recently, depending on when you heard this, right? Museum could be open when you're listening to this, but you from the future, so get your ass out of here. But the point is, recently, they broke ground on the project. Now, this is something that has been in the works for a minute. I probably talked about it on a podcast a long time ago. I honestly remember, and I kept forgetting about it, and in some ways thought it just wasn't going to happen, but here and there I started hearing things, and before this groundbreaking, I heard about it. Well, the groundbreaking is on their YouTube channel, right? You can go to their YouTube channel. The name of the video is the UHHM YouTube groundbreaking ceremony, so you can watch it for yourself. If you didn't get the opportunity to be there, unlike some other hip hop fans, there were a number of hip hop legends there, from Chuck D to PMD of EPMD, Nas, LL Cool J, a couple of legends. Fat Joe was there also. But nevertheless, let's talk about the Universal Hip Hop Museum and what does this mean. Now, hip hop in about 3 years from now, I believe. I think 3 years from now, we'll be celebrating 50 years since it was born in the Bronx. 50 years. Now, I remember when it was hit the 45-year mark, and I did an article, not necessarily only talking about the history of hip-hop, because everybody's doing that, right? With how spectacular is that if everybody's saying the same things? But I did an article on hip-hop and where are we now and where are we going. And I was really critical of fans as to the direction of hip hop music in particular, and culture in a lot of ways. And some of that blame obviously is on artists, right? But as a culture where we're all fans, right? Artists, DJs, producers, regular fans like you and me, we're all accountable in some ways. And I feel like, speaking to the old heads right now, I feel like we don't understand hip hop being this old, what it means, right? And you know what? I'm not only talking to the old heads, I'm talking to everybody, because that also applies to a younger audience. We don't understand completely what does that mean? 50 years of hip hop, a museum, a museum, a literal, like, not no, oh, they got a room and they got a couple of belts, Curtis Blow belts, and shirts, and no, we talking about a full-on museum with money behind it that should be official, should be recognized as the National Museum of Hip Hop History, but I know it's a universal because hip hop got to do it differently all the time. Ours, whatever. I was going to say what words rhyme, but you figured it out. You a hip hop fan, but nevertheless, I kind of look at it as people need to understand what we're talking about, right? Look at where hip hop started. Started in the 70s, right? In the Bronx. And here we are in 2021, and streaming services are all the rage. It is the direct pipeline for how people typically, I know some of you don't, some of you still buy CDs and look for tapes and vinyls, but as far as the majority, streaming services are the direct pipeline for how most of us get our hip hop music, because it's the most streamed genre of them all, including jazz, above rock, folk, blues, country, pop. Hip hop is number one. And that says a lot in 2021, that being the case. And what I don't think people get, hip hop fans, young and old, get, is what does that mean for the direction, the future of hip hop, how people look at it. Well, I'll give you a couple examples. Some of your favorite politicians, some of your favorite radio hosts, people who are older, right? People who are in positions of power, in decision-making positions, regardless of where they work, whether they work at social services, they're a principal at your school, whatever. They grew up on hip hop. They grew up on Biggie and NWA. They grew up on LL Cool J, and okay, I go with the bars. Yeah, I can't help it sometimes. And Kool Moe Dee. They grew up on Curtis Blow. You know what I'm saying? They marveled at movies that like Crush Groove and Breakin' and Beat Street. You know what I'm saying? They used to be dancers and maybe rappers and DJs. Maybe they still do it. And these people are going to continue to lead society as the generations get older. They're going to continue to be the people who make the decisions for the world. A lot of them grew up with hip hop. There was a time where hip hop was only for the young kids, right? 80s and 90s, and probably late 70s, right? But definitely 80s. I was around for that. Hip hop wasn't even on the radio like that in NY. You had to either listen to a AM station, right? Special K and Teddy Ted, or you had to stay up and listen to Mr. Magic late at night just to hear what was new. Then we got stuff like the Source magazine, staples in hip hop, XXL magazine, the things that Vibe did. And we got to points where rappers were, street legends for rapping. And then they became cats who had singles and gold albums, and then platinum albums, and then multi-platinum albums. We went from never really seeing hip hop on TV to it being in everything, commercials, everything. So my point is what people don't understand is that hip hop has been around for a long time now. 50 years will be a long time now. And to have a museum is perfect to line up with that, right? Because of the simple fact that when that 50-year anniversary hits and everybody's, documenting hip hop and blah, 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 and what's the greatest this and what time is this and blah, 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 and whatever it may be, you have a place you can go that's tangible. Just like the NFL Hall of Fame and the Basketball Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, for which, we get excited because Jay-Z and LL Cool J was inducted. But this will be our house. The Universal Hip Hop Museum will be our house. It'll be a place for people like us who grew up on hip hop to go down memory lane, right? And get the nostalgia in and to see some things that maybe we saw at a concert in person. Maybe we was there. Or maybe, we heard about it and now we get to see, oh, this is the jacket. This is the jersey Jay-Z had on at Summer Jam when he went at Mobb Deep and Nas. This is the jersey he was wearing. You know what I'm saying? This is the jersey Biggie was wearing in that video. This is the Straight Outta Compton jacket and hat with Jerry Curl juice still in it that NWA wore. I'm saying. But you know what I mean? Like, it could be a place like that, and then at the same time, right? It could also be a place for others to learn exactly what hip hop is, exactly what it was, and to truly understand the art form. Because they have a couple of people who are teaching here and there, right? And, the curriculum is whatever they want or whatever they feel is necessary. But now we could have a place that takes you through that history, that takes you from the beginning to the prominence of New York and starting hip hop, and then the different areas which blew up as a result, like Atlanta, like California. Looking at trap music, looking at, the Texas cats, right? Like Ghetto Boys and UGK. Maybe also looking at, I'm being optimistic, but maybe also looking at the different sounds in hip hop, right? What each area brought to hip hop. How maybe hip hop at one point in the 80s was a sound that was familiar or linked more closely to New York, and a sound that was linked more closely to LA. But now you got what Miami does with it, what Atlanta does with it, what Nelly did with it, right? With St. Louis, what he brought to it, what Bone Thugs and Harmony brought to it. And all of this could just be a teaching tool. And you don't have to be a kid to learn, right? There's people who I know who are older than me, right? That don't know the history of hip hop. I remember my brother-in-law asked me, right? Is there a playlist you can give me that kind of gives me a sense of the history of hip hop? Now, y'all know I'm a big hip hop head, so I'm like, man, that playlist would be too long. First of all, you can't play it around your kids. Second of all, I don't even know if I could boil that down to essential. I could, but I couldn't, right? So I wrote articles and I did podcasts and stuff like that time in hip hop, and it'll be a link in the description so you can check that out. Us preserving hip hop history and handing out flowers as we always do. But the Universal Hip Hop Museum represents all of that, and it tells a story that some of us have heard all the time, some of us know, but not that many people know. You know how many times I've had to explain to certain people who are like, man, I don't like hip hop, all that cussing and violence and misogynistic lyrics and blah, blah, blah. And they don't really understand where it comes from. They think it's just people who have made fun out of bragging about these things, out of bragging about violence, out of bragging about, promiscuous women and how many they could get. And, only talking about, money and cars and things like that. And hip hop is so much more than that. But to speak to that point, I've had to explain to them. Hip hop came from the gutter. It came from poverty. It came from lower education, lower expectations. So you got to understand the places where the music is coming from in order to understand why they're talking about these things in the way they are, why they're so obsessed with money and having the baddest women in the world. You know what I'm saying? And when you do that knowledge, then you understand why the lyrics are what they are. But please understand, that's not all they are. We have Christian rappers, right? That rap about the Lord. We also have gangster rappers that speak strictly to the streets. We have what you would call like radio-friendly party rappers, right? That's just all about a good time and, to use an old school friend, cold rocking the party, right? That kind of stuff. We also have conscious rappers, rappers that have a message, that see some of those things that the gangster rappers see, but they choose to think a different way. All of this represents the mind state of the people in the ghetto, because they're all coming from the same place. They're all poor, but they're all dealing with the reality in one way or another. And the funny thing about it that they don't get is that the objective is always to get out. It doesn't matter if you're the party dude, the gangster, the conscious dude, everybody wants a better life. And that's what hip hop represents. And I hope the Universal Hip Hop Museum really does a good job of bringing all of those themes and all of that history to light. Because the worst it could be is a place of highlights only. But it needs to be a place of education. It needs to show where the inspiration comes from sampling, the different eras of sampling, right? Tell that story as well. Tell the story of James Brown might as well be a part of hip hop. He was sampled so much. Same thing for Parliament Funkadelic. Jazz, Blue Note Records played a big role in a pivotal time in the 90s with hip hop samples. Show how it's not stealing, it's preserving the original records, right? Now I'm going on a complete soapbox, but my point being is that the Universal Hip Hop Museum is a very good thing. And if you're a hip hop fan, you should be lining up to go at least see what it's like. Because if it's anything like when I visited the NBA, not the NBA, but the Basketball Hall of Fame, we'd be in for a treat, because the Basketball Hall of Fame is not just about seeing the jerseys of legends you know. You come back from that place knowledgeable of not just NBA pros, but people who were successful in the college game, people who paved the way for other athletes, some athletes you never even heard of. You never hear their names on ESPN or anything like that. Not that they got to name everybody, but the point is I felt educated on basketball, and I felt like it was overwhelming. There was so much there. It's the same thing with the National African American Museum in DC. We didn't even get to finish. It was so much to absorb and read. And of course, there are the things you already know about, but it's so much more than that. That's what this museum has to be. That museum has to be that. It has to be a place where if you think you know it all or you know nothing, you both walk out feeling more educated about hip hop music and culture. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Clubhouse, and all of that at Vegas World INC. And check out my weekly podcast, Hip Hop Now Podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts. But also, the link is in the description of this episode. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace. Drop it on the random.